one of the things, the discussions I want to throw at you, and I know you're very familiar with this, and this is the discussion. Oh my gosh, NATO wants to jump in. NATO wants to put troops on the ground. NATO wants to, and I looked and I'm like, well, the Russians got a lot of guys there, and they're like building up their military to 1.5 million people here. Like they're preparing to be able to defend their border with massive numbers. And NATO, the more I read about the UK and Germany, what I see is that NATO's military has like dwindled away to barely a shell of what it was in the 80s. So is NATO in a position physically, militarily, to get involved in a conflict on the Russian border, Scott Ritter?
No, not at all. Zero potential, zero capability, zero sustainability. They're not trained properly. They're not equipped properly. They don't have the logistics capabilities. Simply put, it would be like leading lambs to a slaughter. I mean, the British can sit there and, I mean, there's the old saying that if somebody speaks to you in a British accent, they have to be correct just because they sound correct. So, we can get the British general, I say, old chap, the British Army will, of course, fall in well-disciplined lines and advance forward smartly, and you'll all die because there is no British Army anymore. It's literally a joke, a joke. The American military, better trained, better equipped, no sustainability. I mean, that's what people have to understand, that, an Army brigade by itself, is not capable of fighting the Russian army. And the Russians have an army. This is not the 200,000 peacetime contingent that initiated the special military operation. We're nearly a year into this. Russia has mobilized not just reservists, but also its defense industry and, frankly speaking, the nation. A military tends to do better when they have support of the people behind them. And I think we can say unequivocally that the Russian people are solidly behind this effort, which gives political leadership a lot more flexibility. You see, if you're trying to fake out a population by winning a quick and easy war, and then the quick and easy war doesn't turn out to be quick and easy, bad things can happen at home. Right now, the Russians, notice who's talking about the clock, who keeps pointing to the calendar. Everybody but the Russians. You haven't seen the Russians point to the calendar once. They haven't told you anything about their timelines. All they say is, we have our stated objectives of demilitarization and denazification, and those remain the same. Everybody else says, Russia needs a quick fix. Russia has to go now. Russia has to do. Russia doesn't have to do anything except win, which is what they're doing.
Looking at it, and what I see is, years of, and I mean, I don't want to get into politics, but we could, the politics of neoliberalism. You deindustrialize your society. You know what I mean? You hollow out your society. It seems to me that NATO slash the U.S. and end of the war on terror for 20 years. What they can't do anymore is fight a land war. They got some planes, F-35s, how they would actually act in battle. There are a lot of pilots that aren't thrilled with them, let's be honest. But they've got a lot of ships. In the days of hypersonic missiles and ship missiles, I don't think that ships have a long, if you're on a ship and you start a war these days with hypersonic missiles and the number of missiles, what China or Russia, China is an example, they can say, we're going to put 100 missiles on each ship. I don't care how many Aegis systems you have. The numbers are overwhelming. So I just don't see that NATO or the US has that land army and has that ability to get in the battle, and a week or 2 weeks later the land army's fighting and they say, okay guys, re-up, we're out of artillery, and they're going to say, can you give us 6 months? No, we're going to get overrun in 6 hours, we're out. That's what it seems to me, that the land army capability is zilcho gone over right now.
No, it's we don't have a land army. We don't. Not one that can fight. We've spent 20 years, and maybe Americans are going to start to, understand the consequences of the global war on terror and the absolute stupidity of the last 2 decades. Because not only did we squander trillions of dollars? Did we squander our national reputation? Did we squander thousands of lives, tens of thousands of wounded, millions of foreign citizens? But we don't talk about them because they're just little brown people. But the reality is we we've laid waste to entire nations, entire peoples, and um, you know, yeah, that's all horrible. That's the kind of stuff that gets you sent straight to hell when you die. But from a military standpoint, not only did we not win, and I'm just sick and tired, frankly speaking, of all the vet bros out there that are, oh, we're gonna do this. You guys lost. Okay, shut up already. I don't want to hear it from you. Just because you could kick down the door of an Iraqi villager's home and go in there and scare the dog poop out of his family doesn't mean you know anything about war, because you know nothing about war. You know, Afghanistan, the same thing. I'm not denigrating the courage of the guys that are out there. There was some heavy fighting there. There's no doubt about it. But there wasn't anything related to what's going on in Ukraine right now. We never suffered the kind of artillery barrage that the Ukrainians put up with on a daily basis. We got hit with mortars, we got hit with this, we got hit with that. And, I'm sure it was scary at the time for the guys undergoing it. But no, we don't know anything about war. But we also spent 20 years literally gearing every aspect of the military industrial enterprise and the military enterprise itself, from recruiting. Literally, recruitment goals were made to meet the manning requirements of the global war on terror. We altered standards to get people to come in. Uniforms were designed with that in mind. Equipment, we stopped talking about tanks and we started talking about MRAPs with the V-shaped hulls that can survive IEDs and all that kind of stuff. And we did everything for that, nothing for the big fight. Meanwhile, the Russians were spending 20 years looking at the United States and NATO going, yeah, we may have to fight them someday, so everything we do is geared to that. So all these people are like, yeah, the M1 tank. M1 tank has been out there for years. Russians have pretty good intelligence services like we do, and I wouldn't be surprised if they know every secret about the M1 tank. I mean, it's not that much of a secret, guys. And that their defense industry has actually built weapons that are designed specifically to kill the M1 tank or the Leopard 2 or the Challenger 2. So there's no technological advantage. There's training. I always remind people that you can look good on paper, but you're useless unless you train and train realistically and nonstop. When I went to 5th Battalion, 11th Marines, I showed up and they were still basically Vietnam War era notions of artillery support. We got the direct support battalions, we got the general support battalions, we got them online. We'll do the schedule of fires. Everybody ready? Fire. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, pick up, move, sit down, get ready. And I was tasked with coming up with transforming that into something that could fight the Soviets. And I said, well, the first time we sit down and try and do, a dug in schedule of fire will be the last time, because we got this much artillery, they got 10 times as much. And if we sit there and give them a target, they're going to kill us. So we got to start moving. We got to move. We got to displace. We have that dedicated counter battery. And as soon as it fires, it has to move. We have to move. We have to detect them. We have to, be better at target acquisition than they are. We have to hit, run, move, da, 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 da. And we came up with a whole new way of doing this. And then we trained on it. We spent weeks at a time in the field training. And after about 2 years, we were pretty good. But the problem is, if you stop training, you're not good anymore. You're only good as long as you continue. It's like, I don't know, bodybuilder. I'm not one, but, go to the gym, you're lifting weights, and you get pretty toned, you get cut and everything, and you're looking good. And then you take a 6-month break eating McDonald's. I can guarantee you the body ain't going to look like it was when you started. And that's the U.S. military. We used to be pretty good. We used to be a bodybuilder. We're now the fat slug on the couch who's been eating nothing but McDonald's, and the muscles have either gone soft or atrophied. That's the U.S. military today. And NATO's worse. NATO is 10 times worse. The German army can't fight. I literally won't get out of the barracks. The French army, not much better. The Dutch, dream on. The British, as I've already told you, you can take the entire British Army, put it in a soccer stadium, you're going to have 40,000 extra seats, and it's only going to get smaller. There's the Canadians. No, nothing, nothing. Nobody has anything. The Turks have something, but they're not really part of NATO anymore. So, but the Russians, as you pointed out, in addition to 300,000 mobilized, 180,000 volunteers that have been brought in since then, they're expanding their military to 1.5 million. Most of those will be contract professional soldiers. Many of them are going to be in airborne divisions and marine divisions, expeditionary forces, more artillery being brought in, new forces to go up against, oh gosh, that's right, Sweden and Finland. You know, there's that old saying, mess around, find out, something like that. They messed around and they found out. You know, their little protocol that Jan Stoltenberg cooked up back in Madrid in last June, it ain't worth the paper it's written on, because they weren't serious. They thought Turkey would just fold. Turkey didn't fold. You burn a core on, das vidanya, buddy. Or as the Turks would say, Allah smalade, gule gule, get out of here. They're not going to be part of NATO. But guess what NATO just did? They took an area where there was absolutely no Russian military threat, and the Russians are now building an army there because they can never trust Finland and Sweden again. So the Finns and the Swedes don't get NATO protection, but now they have to deal with the consequences of their actions. Sort of just desserts.
Yeah, and it certainly seems as though the at this point, and we can look at Germany. There have been a couple of German, very high-ranking former military officers who have come out and pushed back on this. We hear that we see this Rand Corporation report. It seems that there are some people, albeit maybe they're neocons, maybe they're not, that are to some level practical, that are looking at this saying, if this goes further, well, number one, well, address this. Russia's not only demilitarizing Ukraine, Russia is demilitarizing NATO. They have created a trash compactor in Ukraine, and basically NATO is sending everything they got right into the trash compactor to be mushed up. And it seems to me that some of the military minds or leadership in NATO is saying, "What are you doing here? Why are we sending this stuff? They're just blowing it up." And the idiots at the State Department are like, "Yeah, but we've got to win the PR war. We got to win the war on Twitter or something." Scott.
The Twitter war, yes.
Yeah, they're winning on Twitter.
Because if you win the Twitter war, you occupy territory. That's how it works. The best tweet wins. You just
the
capture
metaverse.
the
They put on those glasses and look around, and they're winning in the metaverse.
Yeah, I ratioed them to death, or something of that nature. I mean, one of the interesting things that I just saw the other day was Greece has decided they're not going to send their Leopards. They have a number of Leopard tanks, and people are saying, "Hey, Greece, you should send theirs." And the Greeks went, "No, we need to hold on to them because we're going to be fighting a war with Turkey pretty soon." I just want to remind everybody that Greece is a NATO member, Turkey is a NATO member, and they're talking about fighting each other. Hey, what happened to NATO unity? Doesn't exist. But that the fact is, as the German, there's the head of the German. He's not the head general. He's not the minister. The Germans are funny the way they organize. But this guy came out and he said, "We're naked. We're literally naked already. We have nothing left. And now you're getting rid of what little things we have left, and we can't replace them. We don't have the ability to replace them. We don't have the money. Steel costs a lot more now because of the high energy prices. And if anybody thinks that we're going to give away these tanks and then there's going to be a backfill with new tanks, it isn't going to happen. There won't be any new tanks because we can't afford new tanks. We need to keep the tanks we have, which, by the way, aren't enough, and most of them don't work." But this is the reality of NATO. NATO has spent the last 30 years living under the umbrella of Uncle America. And, it's not been a nice relationship, but Uncle America was always there to say, "We got your back." But what was Uncle America doing? Taking everything out of Europe, putting it into the Middle East, putting it into Afghanistan, etc. We invaded Iraq with, I forget, we still had, over 120,000, 150,000 troops in Europe at the time. Uh, when we finished with that, we were down to 60,000. We used to have 10,000 tanks in Europe, but sometime in the early 2000s, we had zero tanks. We got rid of them all. We're just going strikers because we didn't. Nobody was thinking about a war. Nobody was thinking about a war. We wanted the strikers because they were mobile. We could put them on airplanes and fly them. So we're still viewing Germany as nothing more than one of our lily pads. You know, we take a brigade here and we can move it around and all that. But nobody was thinking about, hey, what happens if we have to fight the Russians? We didn't have the capability. We just assumed the Russians weren't going to do it. Um, well, we guessed wrong. We provoked the bear. The bear came out of hibernation. The bear's beating the snot out of the whatever we want, whatever metaphor we want to use for Ukraine. Um, and we don't have any. And there's everybody saying, NATO's going to intervene with what? With what? Understand that generals don't commit suicide for a living. Um, you don't get the 4 stars by committing suicide. They're not Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump wanting to die for their country. They literally want to live. They're 4-star generals and they're smart relatively. And they know that they can't sustain the combat. I mean, they talk big. You always have the colonel that wants to become a general, the brigade commander who will spew out the nonsense. We are here for a presence, deterrence, to send a signal to the Russians that should they choose to come over, there will be a heavy price to pay because we're here, all 4,000 of us. And the Russians are going, we just mobilized 300,000. How many tanks you got there? 150? We got about 2,500. What's your artillery count? 18? Wow. We got 1,800 just in this sector alone. I mean, that's just the reality of it. Oh, when are you going to run out of ammo? Day 2? We'll never run out of ammo. This is the reality. I mean, NATO will not intervene. That's a long way of saying NATO will never put one foot on the ground in Ukraine. Not because they don't want to,
Right.
because they can't. Because they can't.
I think you're right. And I'll say this: and if they can't do that, there's this guy talking about aim for the head. We're going to fight the Chinese. And here's the first thing I thought, Scott: where in Asia would the U.S. be able to fight a land war with China? Where could we land? Oh, we're going to land 20,000 troops on the shores of how many Chinese troops they got there? Oh, they only got 400,000. Just a small contingent of Chinese troops in this area, a meager 400. You forgot how many Chinese people there are. There is no place in Asia that the U.S. can land a contingent of military guys and like put a bunch of hovercrafts up and attack, that they're not going to have 100 times the amount of military that's going to, it's just absurd. And not to mention, they'd never get there.
Yeah, the only exception to that would be the South China Sea, where China's built these fortified islands.
Okay.
The Marine Corps has been reorganizing and restructuring to engage in warfare on these islands. Not the old-fashioned amphibious assault where the landing vehicles come off the LST and then they line up and they circle around and then you head to Green Beach and the Red Beach and you come in and move in and all that. No, those days are over. That doesn't happen anymore. They're talking about loading people into fast boats and skimming around, firing rockets here, then moving, and very different way of fighting. But that's pretty much the only way we're going to be able to engage the Chinese with any chance of victory is on those islands, because the Chinese are limited on what they can bring to bear, to be able to project power. They have significant power already ashore. They fortified it. But those are long seaborne lines of communications that can be interdicted. And we could end up with some sort of Guadalcanal type fighting, that we did against the Japanese back in the early days of World War II. That's it, because you're right. We try and move in on Taiwan, they'll sink every ship we have before it gets there. General Minahan, who's the genius who wants his guys to practice. First of all, you got a problem when the general officer is referring to a clip. I'm sorry, General.
It's a magazine.
It's a magazine, and I don't know when the last time you qualified on a military course qualification course, but we don't empty a clip into the head. We tend to fire center mass in the target, um, trying to get as many points as we can. But that's okay. He's just a transportation pilot. I mean, I respect the guy. Four-star. He's a cool guy. When he puts his awards on, he puts the 3 unit awards. He doesn't put any individual awards because he's a team player, and a lot of people respect that. He doesn't walk around and say, "I got the Distinguished Service Medal. I got this. I got that." He has his 3 unit awards that say, "I'm part of the team that was recognized here." Okay, that's pretty cool. You've been flying transport aircraft your entire life. You've been involved in that business. But that business is not about emptying a clip or magazine or whatever term you want to use into the head. And it's stupid for him to talk about. Back in the lead up to the Gulf War, Desert Storm, there was an Air Force general, and I think his name was Dugan. I have to go back and check, but he spoke out of school. He spoke about bombing the Iraqis and things that he shouldn't have been saying. He wasn't wrong, but it wasn't his place to say it. And he was fired immediately. And I'm telling you right now, General Minahan needs to be fired immediately. What he said was grossly irresponsible. Under no circumstances should any 4-star general be talking like he's talking. It's not his call. He doesn't get to make the call. He doesn't get to write that memorandum. He doesn't get to say anything. His job is to prepare his people to be able to bring airplanes from point A to point B in a sustainable fashion, not to project about the potential of conflict. Last time I checked, that was the Defense Intelligence Agency's job to make that determination, and then they would report that through their chain of command to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who would report to the National Security Council, who would then warn the president that we might need to be ready to go to war by 2025. But you don't delegate that to a 4-star general in charge of moving boxes from one airbase to the next. He should be fired on the spot, and he's not, which tells you sort of where we are today in military discipline and everything. We let a guy spout off like that on one of the most dangerous topics, war with China.
Why? That's the one that goes nuclear. That's the one that goes nuclear, buddy. Yeah, in a hurry, because they're going to sink some ships, they're aircraft carriers.
And why would you want to, Why would you want to get the Chinese on edge? What, especially, I mean, isn't he listening? Kevin McCarthy's talking about going to Taiwan. I mean, doing Nancy Pelosi, but doubling down on stupid. So here we are getting ready to gin the Chinese up again. And the last thing we need is some idiot transportation general talking about going to war in 2025 and empty a clip into the head.